another post-cult worldview ride-along. In this episode, we're going to be talking about doxastic voluntarism, which is the idea that we have voluntary control over our beliefs. And in this video, I'm going to be presenting the case that belief, in fact, is not a choice, but is rather the involuntary response to evidence. And I'll use myself to illustrate this point. I want you to think about me at three different points in my life and asking me the question, when do you believe Jerusalem fell to the Babylonians? Now, if you'd asked me this question in my mid-20s, my response would have been 607 B.C.E. All the evidence that I had ever been presented with up until that point suggested that Jerusalem fell in 607. Now, this was bad evidence that I was given, but that's all I had. And so it took no effort for me to maintain this belief that Jerusalem fell in 607. Now, fast forward to 2011. In October and November, there was a 2-article series on this subject of when Jerusalem fell. And in the opening article, it asked a question, much the same way a question from the reader's article starts with a question. And it said something along the lines of, historians generally believe that Jerusalem fell in 586 or 587 BCE. Why do Jehovah's Witnesses say that it is 607 BCE? For me, this was like a bolt from the blue. I had no idea that there was any controversy on this subject, that there were people on the planet that didn't believe that Jerusalem fell in 607. This created for me cognitive dissonance. And when you have cognitive dissonance, it's hard to say what exactly you believe, because you're kind of trying to hold two beliefs at the same time, or there's conflict between what you know to be true and what you believe to be true. It's very foggy, fuzzy. And at this point, it did require some effort for me to hold on to the belief that Jerusalem fell in 607. I mean, I read the article more than once, and it really didn't make a lot of sense to me, but I tried to hold on to the belief that 607 was the correct date. In fact, if you had asked me, I still would have said, I believe that Jerusalem fell in 607, but I'm suggesting that it wasn't a genuine belief because of the cognitive dissonance. And I'll return to this towards the end of the video. Now, fast forward again to 2014, when I have finally gained the courage to do objective research into my belief system, and I have learned that there is actually no controversy over when Jerusalem fell, that in fact all historians, all archaeologists, all astronomers, and theologians say that Jerusalem fell in 587 BCE, and that it's really only Jehovah's Witnesses who say it's 607, and they have to, because their authority structure of their leadership is built on that date. From 607 you get 1914 and 1919, the year when Jesus supposedly chose their religion. But I'm not telling you anything you don't know if you're an ex-Jehovah's Witness. So, after doing this objective research, I had the involuntary response of believing that Jerusalem fell in 587 BCE. I still have that belief. It requires no effort for me to maintain that belief. Now, at this point, you may still be thinking that belief is a choice. And if that's the case, let me put it a different way. If I had $2 million and I was with you at this moment, and I held out this $2 million to you and said, I will give you this $2 million if you believe in the Easter Bunny, could you do it? Would your desire to have $2 million be enough to allow you to have a genuine belief in the Easter Bunny? You might be able to intone the words, "I believe in the Easter Bunny," but that's not belief. You would need evidence, and I was not presenting you with evidence. I was just asking you to believe something. So I'll leave that out there for you to ponder. Now, we've so far been discussing what's called direct doxastic voluntarism, that we have the ability to have direct control over our beliefs. And I'm saying that we don't have direct control. However, there is such a thing as indirect doxastic voluntarism, which means that we have an indirect control over our beliefs. And I think that there are at least two ways that I can think of that we can do this. The first way is through an investigation. And it might be a good investigation or a bad investigation. I'll give an example of a bad investigation first. Imagine that you liked the idea of fairies and decided that you wanted to believe in them. So you went on the internet and searched for all the testimonials about people who have encountered fairies, all the anecdotes from people who believe in fairies, and you avoided anything that contradicted these anecdotes, anything that delved into the psychology of magical thinking, and just kept reinforcing this idea that fairies exist. At the end of this investigation, you might have something that resembles belief in fairies, and you could intone the words, "I believe in fairies." But I would suggest that because this was done through a process of deliberate confirmation bias, the belief would not be wholehearted. It would not be genuine belief. Even if the confirmation bias and cognitive bias was subconscious, there's still a part of you that knows that you did it in a dishonest way. And so the belief that comes out of it, I would question whether it was genuine belief. Now let's give an example of a good investigation. I've already given the example of me and researching 587, but consider another one. Imagine that you were raised a fundamentalist Christian who had the interpretation of Scripture that we have a heliocentric universe and that our Earth is flat. You were taught this from the time that you were born on. You were aware that there were people that disagreed with this, but you had never looked at the evidence that supported contrary beliefs. And at some point in your life, you encounter something that contradicts the heliocentric universe that is impossible to ignore. And so you decide to go to all of your beliefs and question them all and see if they're true. And you sit down with each one and you look at both sides of the argument. And after this investigation, you have the involuntary response of believing that in fact the Earth is not the center of the universe, but rather revolves around the sun, and that the Earth in fact is not flat, but is something much more like a sphere. This belief that the Earth is a sphere and that the Earth revolves around the sun will be an involuntary response to genuine investigation. Now, the second way that we might have an indirect effect on our beliefs is by choosing who we trust. We can't choose what we believe, but we can choose what we trust. Now, I'm getting this from my good friend Vincent D. Porter. He also has a YouTube channel, and I'll put in the description below a link to one of his videos where he talks about believing in the Bible, and makes the point that if we believe that the Bible is the inspired Word of God, that means that we are putting our trust in the men who made that claim that the Bible is inspired of God. Just like those who believe that the Quran is inspired of God are trusting the person who made that claim, or the people that believe that the Book of Mormon is inspired of God are trusting Joseph Smith. Now, I have to add that I think there is an element of belief that comes before trust. If I say to you that I trust you, I'm effectively saying I believe that you are trustworthy. And I would suggest that before that belief, there still has to be at least some evidence. So if there's somebody that you love dearly and they say, just trust me on this, you have a relationship with this person. And that background with that individual is a form of evidence. You feel you have a reason to trust them. Now, if it was a complete stranger they said, trust me, they're not presenting with any evidence, they're just saying, trust me. Whatever they're asking you to believe, you're probably not going to believe because you have no evidence to lead to that trust. Now, these two areas of investigation and trust shed light on why cults are so dangerous. Think about it. Cults control your information. They tell you what is okay to research. And through a very careful process, they get you to trust them. When a cult recruiter finds you in a vulnerable state, you are susceptible to trusting somebody that you shouldn't. You know, these organizations will love bomb you, and then they will indoctrinate you, and then they will start to instill phobias of mistrusting the leadership of that organization. This process literally controls what you believe. If they can control your information, what you are allowed to investigate, and control who you trust, they can control your beliefs. And that's scary. And it's unethical. And it's why I do what I do. Why, many former cult members do become activists. Now, I want to conclude with a few questions. The first one is, obviously, do you think that belief is a choice? Why or why not? The second one would be, if belief is not a choice, what are the implications for Pascal's wager? If you don't know what Pascal's wager is, look it up and let me know what you think. If belief is not a choice, does Pascal's wager hold any water? Should it be a motivator? The third question is a little bit harder for me to put into words. Go back to earlier in our conversation when I talked about 2011, when I first encountered this idea that people disagreed with 607, that there are historians who believe that Jerusalem fell in 587. There were many Jehovah's Witnesses that read that article and thought nothing of it. It wasn't a bolt from the blue for them. They read it, they accepted the explanation for 607, and went on with their life. You know, they totally trusted the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, so if they say that Jerusalem fell in 607, it must be true. No cognitive dissonance, went on with their belief that Jerusalem fell in 607. So my question is, why was it that I, and most likely you, could encounter new information about 607 and have it affect us? Why were we ready to doubt our beliefs? Why were we ready to question who we trusted? I don't have an answer for that. I think that probably leads down a path of questioning human nature and free will and who knows what else. But I'll leave that there. For the next video, I hope to pursue the question of knowledge. This video is about belief. I want the next video to be about knowledge. And meanwhile, keep in mind that there are more things